All right, welcome to another episode with Share Your Story with Chet. Today I have Joe Escobedo with me. Now, Joe is a lot of things. He's a podcaster, he's ex-LinkedIn, he's Forbes, he calls himself the brand builder, he's a professor, a CEO. But I met Joe with because of a common connection in Tianjin in China at a networking event. And I think we've been connected since, 2008, Joe, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think it's around there. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And we recently reconnected. I've always sort of followed you over time, but I think we recently reconnected just because as I started building up my own journey on LinkedIn, I started following you and really seeing the amazing things that you've been doing and how you've been able to grow yourself on LinkedIn. I remember us having a conversation at the Nico Hotel in 2008, and this wasn't in mind, right? It was just about general things. I think you came for your MBA and you were starting out and you were networking just like me. Uh, Come a long way, both of us, in our own directions here. Uh, so I think today is going to be a very interesting podcast. It's going to be very straightforward towards how to start your journey on LinkedIn, I guess, how Joe started. We'll ask him a few questions about LinkedIn. And anybody who is starting out on LinkedIn, to start out with the basics and how you can sort of grow yourself over time. I think that's what we're going to ask Joe on certain questions. I'm building my own brand up at the moment as well. I'm following what I think I should be doing. Everyone has different advice. Obviously, I take a little bit from Joe, a little bit from other people, but I think, find my own way because that works best being who you are. But Joe is such an inspiration. And I believe you also have a course, Joe, if I ask you.
Yes. For the time being, yes, we do have a course.
So you can definitely visit Joe's profile and you'll get more information. And I'll try to put that in the link below as well. So Joe, I'd love for you to just give us a little information about your story, just a little summary about your story from where you started or where you're here or something that people don't really know about you.
Yeah, what's something not many people know about me? I guess, not many people know that, I lived in Tianjin, China. We lived in Tianjin, China that many years ago. So I've actually been in Asia for, do the math now. I went there in 2007, whatever, to do my master's. And so, it's been a roller coaster of have jobs in corporate agency and now my own company. It's been quite an experience over the past many, many years. Much more gray hair since we first met.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think I don't think you ever imagined that you'll be doing what you're doing now when we met in 2008, because we were all just starting out and this wasn't, LinkedIn wasn't very big at that point of time. It was there, but I was a job seeker on LinkedIn rather than anything else and never knew the power of LinkedIn. I think you've really taken it up to another level with your content, the way you do and the way you operate. So if I ask you now, as we're focusing on LinkedIn, I think you have such great advice to people who are just starting out. Doesn't matter if they're young or old. So what is the first or the simplest advice using your own experience that you have for people who are starting their LinkedIn journey today?
That's a great question. A couple of things that come to mind, one of which is, what is your objective? And this is something that's really, really important. For me, my objective was never to really drive any sales out of it. It was more in terms of to educate the audience. The reason for that is my mom was an early childhood education teacher. I've been in education for most of my life. And so that's one thing that I'm really passionate about is really sharing some of the lessons and tips that I've learned over the years. And that was essentially it. And when I had that mindset, I realized that by default, people look at you as an expert because they're learning something from you. And, by default, they want to find out, okay, let's find out more about this person. So I've been invited to do podcasts, speak at big conferences, and obviously grow the business just through the content that I share, in a very educational and hopefully engaging manner.
Yeah, that's actually great advice as well. For starting out, I believe it's good to follow a few people because it just helps you get a little bit of a vision moving forward. But I seriously believe that individuality is what makes you different. You got to have your own way of proceeding and you can be anything you want to be honest. It's just, you got to believe in yourself, right? So you had a vision when you started or was it just going with the flow?
I would say it's very much going with the flow. I think when I first started, I didn't really know who my audience was or what topics I really want to talk about. So that's another thing that I really want to share with folks is it's really, really tough to stand out now if you're a generalist talking about everything under the sun. But the more you niche down, the more opportunity you have to stand out from the crowd. And people always ask me, how do I stand out from all the clutter that's going on LinkedIn and other social media platforms? My number one advice is always finding your niche. So for me, I started the podcast last year and I had no idea what I wanted to talk about. I talked about basically everything. And then I talked about things that I found very fascinating. And I found ideas or topics that people wanted to hear more about. And that's where I niched down to the B2B Marketing Asia podcast. Previously, it was a Cup of Joe where we just talked about anything that was on my mind. But as the year progressed, I said, okay, it's going to be tough for me to stand out because it's such a general topic. How do I make it more specific? And that was a big shift for me in terms of the way I promote the content and build the content and making sure that it falls under that umbrella of B2B marketing, focusing on Asian leaders, Asian salespeople, and Asian marketers. So that was really important for me.
Awesome. And if you don't know, you are also part of an inspiration for me from a group of people that helped me start my podcast. I remember watching your podcasts, and then I had obviously my mastermind and my mentor and also supporting me. So yeah, it's really, yeah, it's amazing to hear you say things and give advice and also talk about your journey. And again, you're such an inspiration, and I'm sure I see the comments on your podcast. I see how you interact with people. It's great because everyone needs somebody to follow and start and guide. But yeah, I think that's where you really come to play. And people, if you haven't taken Joe's course, I do suggest you take his course because the way you explain things is very clear, the way you articulate things. And I've taken your course and I really sort of enjoyed it, yeah, that's amazing.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
My pleasure. So I think this is something I'd love to ask you because one of the things, and this is a mistake I made, right? When I started out doing what I'm doing now, I didn't really have a strategy, right? Whether it was LinkedIn, whether it was Instagram, whether it was Facebook, I was basically just going in and doing all random things. I didn't sort of sit down and plan, and that hit me because I realized I was stuck after 2-3 months because I had so many things going on. To your point before, you sort of need to niche down on things. But what was your strategy, and how do people create a strategy for LinkedIn specifically now in 2021?
I mean, I think you gave some really good advice earlier in terms of stealing from other people. I mean, I definitely stole in the very beginning ideas. I think Gary Vaynerchuk, I'm not a huge fan of his content, it's per se, but I think in terms of content distribution, I don't think anyone does it better than him and his team. So I definitely got a lot of ideas in terms of different formats, whether it's carousels or animations and things like that, because I think he does it very, very well. So steal as much as you can. I always save post on LinkedIn. I look at it later and it's okay, I like this. How can I apply it to what I'm doing? Going back to your point of injecting your own personality. So I think collecting as much great resources or examples as possible, analyzing those, why did you like them? How can you put your own spin on them? I think is a really good advice starting out. And that's something that I definitely did.
Thank you for that. So if anybody's watching, definitely steal content, but make it your own, right? That's probably one of the biggest things as well. A lot of people talk about taking other people's content, but if you're sort of able to put it in your own words, I think it makes it obviously better and easier as you post. Creating your own identity is so important on LinkedIn now because I believe everyone's doing something similar, right? We all do have similar services, but how do you make it different? How do you resonate with your own tribe? That's something that I guess you just got to keep practicing, and that's what you develop over time.
Yeah, just to add on that, I think one thing that I've always done is create the type of content that I like. So I like really bite-sized, practical, tell me how to do something tips. And that's one thing that I've tried to incorporate, whether it's to my content or the training or the online courses, is really making it as compact as possible, whether it's words or the amount of time. And also, once again, making sure that there is some real life example. That's something that I try to incorporate in every single post, just because it brings it to life. So that's one thing that came from me listening to people talk about either my trainings and say, okay, what do you like about it? And then I consolidated that. I said, okay, what are some of the keywords that keep popping up? And it was practical, bite-sized, snackable, and things like that. And I said, okay, well, that's my niche. I'm going to stick to that. So I think Simon Kemp is another great example. Simon, if you don't know him, definitely follow him on LinkedIn, because he's the exact opposite of me. And I think that's why Simon and I work together so well, is Simon has like these very, very, very comprehensive research reports that he puts out, I think every quarter, on digital and social insights. And his bread and butter, his niche is research. Like that is his, favorite thing to do. I personally would not enjoy doing that. So for me to do that on a regular basis, it does not make sense. So going back to the things that you personally are passionate about, and then you'll eventually find your niche or your tribe. So for me, it's bite-sized practical content. For him, it's these very comprehensive, data-rich reports that he puts out every quarter. So you really have to find your own style in terms of what you like to consume it for content.
I think that simplifies a vision and a strategy, I guess, for a lot of people starting out, because the challenge, it's hard, when you're starting out on a social platform, any platform, you don't sort of know what's next or what you should do or what's going to attract attention. But ultimately, I think for a lot of people, the goal on LinkedIn specifically is, I guess, generating leads or getting a job, so having a strategy is great. Adapting as you move forward is even better. You don't want to be those people, and I'd love to know your thoughts, where you're just stuck on one strategy, and that's, whether it works or not, you sort of keep pushing through. Do you think keep changing and adapting and sort of being more flexible every time with what you're doing on LinkedIn is good, or should you just focus on one thing till you actually achieve your goal on LinkedIn?
Yeah, so a lot of people ask me around strategy, and social strategy is really tough because it's constantly changing the algorithm, the different features they apply. I think one thing that's really important is really to, as we talked about earlier, focus on who your specific audience are, what are your pain points, what's your niche. I think that shouldn't change much over time. What will change is the style, the way you present the content. Even for me and the podcast, I had no idea what I was doing at the beginning. So I tried so many different styles, so many different formats to try to figure out what works, what are people interested in. And now I've done about 100 episodes. So I have some inclination, although definitely some surprising ones that pop up every now and then. But I have some idea, looking at the data and analytics, figuring out how much time are people watching or listening to a specific episode. And I could say, okay, people must like that, so let me create more of that. So in the beginning, you won't really have a clear idea. I mean, no one I know does that, but the more content you create, the more you look at the feedback, the more you look at the analytics, you can understand what are people interested in, create more of that, less of the content that they don't like, and you'll essentially sharpen your strategy over time.
100 episodes, that's great. But yeah, you're right. Over time, you sort of learn, and as you go. I've just started my podcast, to be honest, as well. Like 2 or 3 months ago, I think. And what I'm doing is exactly what you're saying. Like I'm learning as I grow, I'm progressing, and then figuring out what works best, obviously. But I do have a goal in mind with this, because it's all about inspiring people, whether it's to change their mindset or whether it's just to take the first step. But what are your thoughts? Because a lot of people on LinkedIn are always about, hey, what are people going to say? Oh, is my content right? Or, this might be wrong, or an expert might not agree with what I'm sort of doing on LinkedIn, my post. Because everybody is not from a training course in LinkedIn, or they don't know LinkedIn in and out, but they just post because they want to start something, right? What is your thought on this and your advice to people? Should they be bothered about what they're posting, or what people are going to be commenting, or if people are not going to be liking it either?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple different themes that come up. The first is something that's become very popular lately is imposter syndrome. So people thinking that they're not good enough, or they're not a thought leader, they shouldn't be posting. And I definitely had that fear when I was starting out, particularly when I was doing video. When LinkedIn launched video, I dragged my feet for several months because I didn't think that, I looked good on camera, my voice was good enough, or, I was articulate enough. to post anything. And so I really dragged my feet for a long time until I saw all my peers getting all this traction. I said, damn, I might as well try it at least once. So I remember I published something, it was probably the middle of the night, and I was thinking, okay, no one's gonna watch, who cares? I could delete it in the morning. And then I woke up that next morning and I was overwhelmed with the positive response that people had about that video. And so that really fueled the fire. And so since then, I probably put out, hundreds of videos, if not more, on LinkedIn and other platforms. And it just came to that realization that, look, no one really cares, how your hair looks or how your voice sounds. All they care about is, how is this going to help them? Is it something they can apply to their daily life? Is it something that's going to make them think, going to make them laugh? If yes, then you're on the right track. If no, then all the hair, all the makeup, all the lighting in the world will make a difference.
Absolutely. I think it's we as human beings also want to make sure things can benefit us. So it's about, when you talk about building your tribe, your content, I watch things that may help me or I resonate with, and that's my goal. If your content has nothing to do with me, honestly, I'm not interested. And it makes sense, because you're trying to build your tribe. You can't make everybody happy, and you got to niche down specifically as well. So that really makes sense. I'd love for you to share your first video, and I'm gonna share my first video as well that I did on LinkedIn in the comments below. I think it'll be such a motivation for people to see how we started. I have seen your first video. You were 1,000 times better than me, I know, but it was again, these are the small motivations that help people move forward. And yes, you are such a inspiration, like I said, because I know the people who follow you, and it's great. You are being authentic, and that is one of the biggest differences. So,
I appreciate that. And I think going back to your point, the first video when I started the podcast, I really had no idea what I was doing in terms of topics, in terms of interviewing people, in terms of lighting. So the first video, which I'm happy to share, is like literally me just on my phone, and I'm looking at the camera, but the lighting is terrible. I'm shaking, the audio you can barely hear. But ironically, that's still one of the most popular episodes, not because of me, but because the guest was a friend of mine, shared some really, really practical tips. So that, once again, was a realization to me that you just have to do it. You're never going to have good enough gear. You're not going to know enough at the beginning. You just have to go out there and do it. And my buddy was having this call just yesterday. He's saying, I want to do something similar, but he's been, once again, dragging his feet for a couple of years now. I said, man, you just got to go out there and do it. There's no really way to get around it. It will never be perfect the first time. If it's perfect, it means you're doing something wrong because you waited too long.
Right. That just makes so much sense. True. That's exactly how I started as well. I was just sitting one day and I was just like, you know what, let me just record myself. Took my phone out. The quality wasn't very good. The lighting wasn't good. I've developed this over time, obviously, but also one of the goals when I started out was, I want people to start posting with what they have, instead of trying to say, you need a $5,000 camera. You need the best of setups, and I'm just using my webcam as well for this, for example. That's the only little investment was buying a Logitech webcam. You don't need anything else, or a phone. Amazing. So this is a question that I guess I had as well, and a lot of people that I speak to now. I just started my own thing about a year and a half ago, and a lot of my friends are doing the same thing in their own industries, but we all walk out, we used to at least walking out, we have no credibility. So when you start, that's the hardest thing, is to get clients. End of the day, look, we're all trying to get clients because that is what business is all about, right? You can post content, you can talk about things, but you need a revenue stream as well. There are a lot of younger people and even older people who've transitioned without credibility in this new industry that they're working in, whatever they're doing. How would you approach, or rather tell me, when you started, when you didn't have any credibility, how did you get your clients? What were you using? What techniques were you using to actually get your clients in the beginning?
Oh,
if
gosh.
That's okay to say now.
No, at the beginning it was a shit show. I mean, I was all over the place. I was, messaging people. I was trying to speak at conferences. I was, posting on LinkedIn. Oh my gosh, it was terrible. Because going back to the point I made at the very beginning, I had no idea who my audience was. So I was trying to go after startups, multinationals, nonprofit, government, basically anyone who give me money. And I think it's the case when you're just starting out, is you may not know who your audience is. Eventually, one person buys from you, and then it kind of becomes a trickle effect. So I was fortunate to get some B2B clients, and then some B2B tech clients, and after that, more B2B tech clients. And so that's grown that way. But at the beginning, man, I was consulting during the day for another agency. I was teaching at night, and then I would run my own business after that. So I was working about 15-hour days, and it was it was not for the faint at heart. So anyone that advice, if you want to become an entrepreneur or consultant, I would say don't do it unless you want to have a lot of sleepless nights. But with that said, once again, I was just trying to go out and hustle to get as many clients as possible. Eventually, I had to stop doing that because I burned out. And now it's funny, going back to the mind shift change. My goal at the beginning was to get clients. Now it sounds odd, but now I don't try to get any clients. I just try to post things that I find fascinating and are going to be helpful with the audience. And I do it on a regular basis. Now I do it, I think, every single day. And that has led to more business than anything else. I'm not consciously going out and I'm trying to get business anymore. It just comes in organically because, someone saw a post or they saw my profile and then maybe I message them and so on. Versus previously, I was just, messaging people saying, hey, not in your face as much as like the cold email type of things, but it might as well have been that, because it was just, very impersonal, and it was just me trying to basically get money out of people, which felt terrible. I hated doing that, but at the time I kind of had to because I had to feed my 2 kids. But now that the business is kind of doing all right, I can just put out content with 0 sales expectations. So that was one thing that I had when I started the business. Is previously in all my careers, I already had a strict sales KPI, and it always drew me crazy if I couldn't get it. Most of the times I couldn't get it because I was a terrible salesperson. But when I started my business, I said I'm gonna have 0 sales KPIs. I'm gonna have content. I'm gonna have these relationship building KPIs where I either have to post 1 piece of valuable content a day, or I have to message someone and engage with their content. So that was the KPI that I had and I continued to have. And that ironically has driven so much more business than anything else that I tried previously.
Wow. Well, relationships is what business is made on in these days. So that is pretty amazing. I've never thought of KPIs in that sense. I just put out content because I think, people who may resonate with me and I may be able to educate somebody or just get someone moving. But that's a really good KPI. I should steal that one from you, Joe.
Please do. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. So we're going to just ask you a couple of more questions because I just want to finish this podcast with the basis of LinkedIn, So we talk a lot about networking on LinkedIn nowadays. Everybody says, start posting, comment on everybody's post. Yes, that's a great way to network. But is there a way that Joe networks, or how does Joe network on LinkedIn?
That's a great question. I did a course on this recently. So my approach has always been something that I got from the book. And I encourage everyone, if they haven't read this, I've read it at least 15 different times, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. I get no affiliate fees. This is a, 100-year-old book. I forget how old it is, but there's a quote in there. It talks about, you can get more people to be interested in you by being interested in them. And so that is something that's really stuck with me, and being genuinely interested in other people rather than seeing it from my own point of view. And you could see this on LinkedIn all the time. I can automatically tell who's in sales because their feed will just be great job. Oh, awesome. And to me, they're not generally interested. They're just trying to get that person's attention so they can close that deal. And I think it's detrimental to their own personal brand. If anything, it comes off a bit spammy. So one thing I try to do is, message people because I'm generally fascinated by what they're doing. I think it's impressive. And that has been the approach. I'll give you a clear example recently. There is a popular video that this head of marketing did in the Middle East. And it was very, very well put together, probably one of the best B2B marketing videos I've seen. And I literally messaged, I commented it and I said, hey, you know what? This is the most creative B2B video I've seen in a very long time. That was it, because I genuinely meant it. And it's funny because the head of marketing at that company messaged me and he says, hey, thank you so much. My boss liked your comment. You know, they're sharing it internally. And I was like, wow. And then we started exchanging WhatsApp messages. And then he said, hey, I love your video so much. Can I feature it on my podcast? So I featured it on the podcast, and then that did very well. So it's just funny how you can kind of connect all the dots going backwards on something that, once again, if I would have just said, oh, great job, with the generic, no, nice one, you can tell there's no kind of connection. It's just like, I'm just trying to push it out there. I'm trying to hit my KPIs, like trying to get your attention. Right. But if you look at the post, you can tell there's no sales objectives. There's still none. It was more in terms of just complimenting the guy because I thought it was very, very creative the way it was done. And he messaged me. He mentioned that in the podcast. He said, look, if you hadn't wrote that message, if you hadn't reached out first, because there's thousands of people that have watched the video, very few people have commented like you did, we wouldn't be having this conversation. And I think that's a great example of just taking the initiative to reach out. If you find somebody's work that's inspirational or it's helpful for you, go ahead and comment, go ahead and share that post, tag them, because you'd be surprised what impact that has and what can that lead to down the road.
Wow, that is, I haven't done that yet. That is interesting. And I think, yeah, for anybody who's listening and starting out, that may be a really good way, because you're also appreciating that person. You can use them as leverage. But again, I guess you genuinely got to like them, right? You can't just go randomly and comment as well. That's amazing.
Yeah, because people can spot flattery a mile away. And flattery is essentially just trying to tell them something there, you know. It feels awkward. I get it sometimes, and I can generally tell when someone is genuinely interested in what I'm doing versus just trying to feed me nice stuff to get on the show and stuff, things like that.
Right. That does make sense. Thank you for that. Well, I've got two more questions that I've thought of asking you. So the most important thing, and I think that's something that LinkedIn people are talking about and people do, is quantity versus quality. Everybody wants to, post a lot on LinkedIn. They want to do a lot of things in terms of quantity, like commenting on everyone's post, putting out content, doing everything in terms of quantity, because people think that's how you can reach more people. But do you believe in quantity or do you believe in quality? Whatever you're doing, whether it's networking with people, whether you're trying to comment on people's posts, whether you're creating your own content, is quality and posting less or doing things less that are more effective better? Or just because we want to follow the algorithm on social websites where the more you post, the better it is? What is your view on this?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I think, when you're just starting out, I would focus on quantity, trying to get out as much as possible. And then you can see what people are engaging with. You can, remove the things that people are not engaging with. So that'll give you some good insights in terms of building your own content strategy. As you progress, going back to the Simon Camp example, going back to David, who's the head of marketing at HubSpot, I think those guys only post like once a week or something like that. And their posts always go viral simply because the quality is so good. It's very, very difficult to have that level of quality every single day. If you can do it, great. But for them, they do it maybe once a week, maybe a couple times a month. For me, I post every day simply because my business is a little bit different. So I'm trying to I have created a media company. And so media companies, you can't really post once a week because that's not really how media companies work. So I want to make sure that I'm publishing something every day. But if you're in the corporate world, like say, David is, once a week, a post that is really, really packed with a lot of insights, you can get away with doing it. But I think when you're just starting out, you're not going to be able to write at that level. Even Simon's level, you look at the stuff, you will not be able to write at that level that early on because you just won't know how to structure it. So going back to the first example, look at what they're doing. You can get some great inspiration from them. Do it on your own, do it on a regular basis. Once again, tweaking what works, what doesn't work. And then eventually you can dial down the quantity a bit and really focus on that quality portion.
I did not expect that, because I've been, and using myself as an example, I'm trying to do more quality than quantity. But yeah, to your point, I guess if you're starting out, that does make sense. And if I look at it from your perspective, sort of can understand it more. something for me to think about and a lot of people to think about. Thank you for that.
Yeah, just to reiterate that point, when you're just starting out, no one's watching. Like when I first started out, no one was watching my channel, which was great because I could publish whatever I wanted, and if it was terrible, I could just be like, I just remove it. So it gave me a lot more freedom. But now, as my following has grown, I think it's over about 11,000 now. I have to be a bit more conscious about what I push out. I can't just push out random stuff anymore because people will be like, you know what, 11,000 people are following you. You got to put out something pretty good, otherwise, people are going to get quite, frustrated at you, So that's kind of my approach.
Absolutely. You're an influencer now on LinkedIn as well. So yeah, I guess a lot of things you do make an impact. So I guess you're figuring out your own ways how to keep people engaged, but also educating them and making them move forward. That's amazing, man. So my last question to you, Joe, is what advice would you give to people, just if you summarize, who are starting out on LinkedIn, who haven't followed anybody, who are just wanting to start that journey today, for example, what are the 2 or 3 things you would just tell them so they can get started with LinkedIn, whether be a job seeker, whether be someone who's transitioned, or whether someone's trying to get new clients? But if you just say 2 or 3 key points in your words, what do you think people should be doing?
Yeah, 2 things. I think, just to quote Nike, just do it. You have to go out there and just publish something, even if it's not great at the beginning. And the second thing is don't post content. It's going to sound very counterintuitive, but don't post content to get new leads or get a new job. Because when you do that, it's very self-evident that you're doing it in your own self-interest. If your intention, once again, is to come at it from a point of view where I want to educate, engage, or entertain my audience, then that's very evident as well. And people are more attracted to those who are genuinely interested in helping versus those who are generally, want to help themselves. So I talk a lot about this concept of selfish and selfless content. I would say 95% of the content on LinkedIn is very selfish. It's pushing out their own products, their own brands. It's talking about making themselves look great. But the question is, how can you make your audience look great? And part of that is providing those resources, those tips, that inspiration that is going to make them better in their career, their day-to-day lives. So I think, once again, that mindset is very small, but it makes a huge, huge impact to actually growing a business.
Absolutely. You talk about mindset. I think just tweaking the mindset a little bit can do wonders for anybody if you take it in the right direction. Well, thank you so much, Joe, for coming on. I know I've been planning this for a long time, and it's really exciting to actually have you here today. We've known each other for so many years, to be honest. Never thought this is going to happen. I think for both of us, been following you for a while. Even when I got your course, I remember I was like, wow, man, is that ever going to happen to me in the future? But I really appreciate this. And, I think you are someone that I believe is really the perfect person to advise people on starting their journey on LinkedIn. That's why the whole goal of today's podcast was focusing on LinkedIn and the journey. We've got over 700 million people on LinkedIn. And as far as I know, a lot of people don't post often, right? So my goal is also to get people to start creating content just slowly, gradually. And it's an inspiration. It's building your own brand up. But who better than to give advice on that today? So yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Joe. I'm going to make sure I put your first video in the comments. As you said, I'm put my own as well. We'll see what happens from that. But thank you so much, Joe, for coming on to share your story with Chet.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Chet. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.